Thank you for joining us this week, and welcome to
Bourbon! And welcome back to Bottle Bond. It is a beautiful day.
It is a beautiful day for some bourbon.
Damn right, sir. I don't know about you, but I like bourbon.
I do. I like it quite a bit.
Yep.
I like it, yeah, I definitely like it quite a bit.
I like it in my mouth. I like it from the south.
Yeah. I guess that works. I don't know what to say about that. I'm sorry.
Okay, sorry.
I'm an engineer. My improv skill is very low.
That's okay. I've just been drinking. That's all that's going on here.
Today, we're going to talk about some Evan Williams, right?
Yeah, we are. I'm really excited about this, actually. So Evan Williams as an expression is, I will say, it's not a top shelf bourbon, right? Like, you're not going to walk in and spend out the wazoo on this.
Yep.
You're going to find it for relatively inexpensive, but that's okay. It's a pretty good bourbon, even for its price. Yeah.
At some point, you're going to have to, we can talk about this a little later in this episode, but I want to talk about another word. Expression. Right? You keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think, but it's I want to get all of that lingo comfortable in my headspace.
Absolutely, Inigo.
I don't want to stumble off too far, right? So for now, Evan Williams, 1783.
Yeah.
Because
okay, so this is the Evan Williams 1783 because Evan Williams founded the first commercial distillery in the United States in 1783.
The Kentucky spirits producer.
That's right.
We think that's what it means, right?
We're pretty sure.
90%
KSP is what it goes by.
Right.
And Kentucky spirit producer seems to be right.
Right. Well, it also is associated with a actual legal thing. Where we said earlier, legal terms actually matter, right? In this business, legal terms count. Sometimes they mean something, and sometimes they don't. Mm-hmm. So this could be, what was the one? This could be small batch.
Yep.
Where KSP doesn't mean anything, or it could be
something important,
a very specific thing. And I'm pretty sure it is Kentucky Spirits Producer, which was the name of his distillery when he opened it, right?
That's right. When he opened it, it later became more stuff, but we'll get into that here in a little bit here.
Right. And so it was called Evan Williams, 1783.
Yep.
Right. You've told me some of these things. I want to see what I can remember. So
do it.
He was, as we said earlier, most of the stuff was brought over from the British Isles. He was an immigrant from Wales, right?
Correct.
And
where in Wales?
Pemberton or something like that, Pembrokestown, something like that. I'm not looking at our notes or whatever, so I'm trying to remember.
What's the name of the city?
Dale.
Dale is correct.
Yeah. So,
yes, Dale Pembroke.
Pembroke. Yeah. Okay.
I'm sorry, Dale Pembrokeshire.
There you go. Yeah, I knew it was something missing.
It's one of those English names. Yeah. It's actually 4 words all put together.
Yep.
Yeah.
Insufficient Hobbit tones for sure. So, So he started this just 3 years after he got here, which meant he either knew what he was doing or he was a super overachiever.
Yeah. He came over in 1780, and by 1783 he founded the distillery.
Right, and it's right in Louisville, right?
On the Ohio River.
Okay.
In fact, it's even to this day there's a marker there marking the site because it was the first bourbon distillery in the U.S.
Nice.
So if you go there on the site, 5th and Main in Louisville, right on the banks of the Ohio.
Okay.
You can find...
and I'm sure that was both for access to the water to make it, but also probably access to the water, because like we said earlier, right, shipping it down the river was sort of the way things got around.
Yeah, exactly. On the last episode, we talked about how it would get shipped from Old Bourbon County down to New Orleans. And yeah, that's exactly what he did. Like, that's really astute of you, because the biggest problem in distilling in old times is access to water. Like, we have flowing water now. We have running water. I can run a hose and fill up a barrel. No big deal. They didn't have that. So they had to get that water close by. And that's a thing that was true in Scotland and Ireland, carried through into the States. And so the Ohio River provided that water for him as he opened that distillery.
Right.
And then he would ship out those barrels on flatboats down the Ohio River.
Well, and back then, you could actually drink river water.
Yeah, that's true too. We've done some things to the planet.
Yeah. Wasn't the Ohio River one of the ones that caught on fire or something?
Oh, I think it's possible. I immediately thought of the Sazerac distillery spill from a couple of years ago.
Oh, no. I'm talking about it caught on fire because of random chemicals, not because of oil or alcohol or whatever. Right?
Oh, you mean like
caught fire, I think.
Like toxic waste and the apocalypse and the end of the world. Okay, yeah. No, I wasn't aware.
I love it when water catches fire. It's really good.
It's got to be a good sign of the things that are in it.
Yeah. So, anyway, what do we know about Evan Williams?
Okay, so Evan Williams... we're talking about where bourbon comes from, and Evan Williams has to be in there. Like we said, he opened the first commercial distillery, and that I really can't explain how important that is.
Right.
Because with the first commercial distillery, people are no longer distilling things in their shed or their garage. They're not, getting a bunch of stuff and putting it in a jug,
right.
and then just waiting until they can drink it, and hardening up the cider.
Right.
So,
I mean, I'd be willing to bet that people continued to do that.
oh, absolutely.
But they didn't have to.
Oh yeah, I mean, when we get into bottled and bond, the FDA prohibition, a bunch of that stuff, we'll talk about people. Like there were people that were just distilling like pine boards and stuff like that. It's not a good idea. Like literally
flavored kerosene.
Yeah,
yeah, that kind of stuff. Yeah,
killing, like dying and going blind and stuff like that. But that's another episode. So he starts this first commercial distillery, and this begins what would become eventually the commercial landscape in the United States.
Okay.
And the commercial landscape of whiskey is really important for collectors because you can't just get a hold of something.
Right.
Right. The world of commercial alcohol sales in the United States, especially when it comes to hard spirits, is broken into three categories. You can be a producer, so you can make whiskey. You can be Lafroig or Evan Williams or Jack Daniels or whoever.
Right.
But if you do that, then that's all you can do.
Yep.
Like you can sell some bottles at your distillery, and there's some other allowances that are made.
Yep.
But like you can't just like toss your stuff in a truck and take it to the nearest bar and give it to them to start serving to patrons.
Right.
That is illegal.
There's like a whole layer to it, right? So it's the 3-tiered system, was what they call it, right?
Yep.
And I know there is some that's both implemented both state and federal levels.
Yep.
Because I looked at this when we first started this whole conversation.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I'm totally going to do all these things. I'm super excited. And then I discovered you can't.
Yeah.
Right? Like you can only have one license. You can only have a license at a single tier.
Yep.
Right. Though funny enough, you can technically have a spouse with a license at a different tier, or a business partner. You can't have a business partner at a different tier, but you can have friends.
We'll say that there
tiers.
are some legal loopholes that people take advantage of.
Yeah, and all of those things are done by both state and federal, and so there's like the hard walls at the federal, and then the softer, more so specific ones at state, right?
Yeah.
And so like you wind up with that problem where like if you're a distributor, you got to make a buddy with if you're a producer, you got to make buddies with a distributor so you can get your stuff out the door, and the producer has to
sort of I mean, like you have to have a distributor that will carry the product.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, so like if I made 100,000 barrels of whiskey, but there's not a distributor who's willing to distribute it,
right,
then I can't sell it. It just sits with me.
Right, but at the same time, if you're super small time and you made like 10 barrels, you're going to have a really hard time finding somebody who wants to bother distributing those 10 barrels.
Exactly. And that's when you get into like craft distilleries and that sort of stuff. It's why in like especially like small town distilleries, like we have Leanderthal here in town, where you go and like they have their spirit there for you to sell. But that's really the only place you're going to find it, probably.
Well, so actually, this is like another thing I want to do, like a whole like research project, homework task on for me, is like I saw a thing in the news, and I haven't gotten to read the article yet, but there was some sort of regulation related to home distilling.
Yep.
For a while, it was totally illegal, and I guess it was just overturned here in Texas.
Oh my God! If we could talk
to
about
some
this.
degree,
I am so excited.
I don't know the rules about it. That's what I really want to learn. Like, I'm a rules dude, right? So because I'm the guy that gets busted for always doing the wrong thing. So.
All right, so I'm really excited about this because ever since I got into it, you know me, I like to make things.
Yep.
Like I do wood carving and I do 3D printing and I just make
all
shit.
The things. Yeah.
All the things, not the point. But so I obviously, as soon as I got into whiskey, wanted to try making whiskey.
Yep.
You can't. It is illegal. Everybody you've ever met that was like, here, you want a little glass of moonshine? And they gave you their cinnamon moonshine that they made, that's illegal. It's against the law, and that's important.
Yeah.
Now, don't get me wrong. I don't care.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it is illegal.
Yeah.
You can't make a business on it. You can't do the things. It is against the law.
To be fair, there are reasons.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? For example, like, vaporous alcohol is not great.
It's true.
Especially if you live in a small apartment.
That's a really
right?
bad thing.
So there are definitely reasons that make some sense.
Yeah. And I mean, like, even more, say, like, even if, like, just fermenting alcohol in a jug, like, you better have something to let the air out because it'll explode.
Yeah.
It'll just like blow up in your garage, shatter glass everywhere. Like it's crazy.
Yeah, I had college roommates. I know. Yeah. Some of them did that with things deliberately, sometimes not so deliberately.
Yeah. So up until now, it was completely illegal to do any distilling of alcohol in your home.
Mm-hmm.
You can buy stills, you can do that sort of stuff. That stuff isn't illegal to have, but you can only use it for like distilled spirit or distilled oils and those sorts of things. Not allowed for alcohol. The thing you're talking about is they're changing their minds. They're like under a limit, you'll be able to home make again. And
What is it? That was overturned here in Texas. So I think in Texas they're not enforcing, but I don't know if it's like federally right. That's part of why
they're going with marijuana. Then.
Yeah, exactly. Except like why would we want the devil's cabbage here? We definitely have got our own spirits.
I really wish.
But whatever, right?
We're gonna do that.
Different story.
We'll have an episode coming later on where we'll have somebody from the THC industry in California or Colorado come on the show, talk about like alcohol and THC mixed drinks. But that's another show later down the road.
Yep. But so there is some amount of it that's changing. It's like some limit based thing, and I think I'm sure there's lots of things where you can kind of do stuff with it, but it is exciting because I do want to do that too. And like my wife's got that hyper palate, hyper sense of smell, right? So I love it if she was just like, these sound great, let's do these. And then she could tell us like,
oh man,
this is a horrible plan, throw it away. Or like, this is going to be great, right? And then we can kind of like actually mess around and experiment with it because that'll be a lot of fun.
Oh yeah. Your wife's got an incredible palate.
Yeah.
It's pretty awesome.
It'll be good.
But yeah, so you've got the 3-tiered system. You've got producers. Producers make whiskey. Distributors. Distributors take the whiskey from producers and they give it to retail. And retail is going to be bars, liquor stores, Walmarts, anybody who is going to sell you alcohol. And that's part of the reason you can't find any alcohol you want at any liquor stores because perhaps the distributor doesn't bring
and everything
it.
else. Yeah. You got to find the person who takes the requirements from the customer and brings them to the engineers. Sorry, too much to my normal life. You have all these weird the distributors who have relationships with like producers, and they have relationships with retailers, and so you get the very specific things. You get favoritism and regionalism and all that jazz, right?
And there are some benefits. I mean, it lets a store owner get to know their clientele so that they can cater the things the distributor gives to them towards their clientele. But on the other side, it also creates some really unfair things. Like it creates that in itself creates the allocated whiskey system, which we'll talk about in another episode. We've got with that you get into issues where just getting your stuff onto shelves can be a problem for craft distillers. But all that'll be stuff that we can chat about later.
Well, I kind of want to dig into that anyway, because that's the thing that actually really got me jazzed.
For sure.
Right. It's like finding the weird one-offs. So.
Yeah. Okay, so about the bottle, Evan Williams 1783 small batch. Basically what this is well, I'll tell you what this isn't. This isn't from 1783. This isn't an old or expensive or specifically unique whiskey. This is a re-release that they are releasing specifically to honor Evan Williams opening the first commercial distillery in 1783. That's the whole point of this bottle.
Okay.
It is 90 proof, which means it is 45% ABV. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I'm excited to taste it.
So let me see. Let me read the label.
Sure.
Right. So we've got Evan Williams, producer, 1783 being the expression of the flavor.
Yeah.
Small batch also being part of that.
Yep.
Small batch also meaning absolutely nothing.
Like we talked about.
Right. And then then the proofing and the size, which is this whole awesome thing about here in America. The most American of beverages uses the metric system. I'm just going to say that.
That's 750 milliliters is the standard size whiskey bottle.
Yep. So that's pretty great.
Yep.
So let's give it a go.
Let's do it. Go ahead and pour us up. So the thing I like about Evan Williams, even though it's a lower priced whiskey, it's still a pretty decent whiskey. So I'm excited to see what they did for this small batch.
Small pour. Sorry about that.
Oh, you're all right. It's a half ounce.
Super duper small pour.
Yeah, I see that.
I actually don't think I've ever had Evan Williams. I've had things at a bar or whatever, and I don't think I've ever seen it or had it. Because most places, right, their shelf or their well is like something bigger, like something bigger, more mainstream.
It's Woodford Reserve. It's
looks
Maker's
nice.
Mark.
It's really nothing special. Yeah,
it's something.
So I don't think I've ever gone for this. So cheers.
Cheers.
Tell me about it.
God, this nose on that.
So the 90 proof means it doesn't burn real hard, which is nice.
Mm-hmm.
It's weird. It actually tastes. It has like a. If I were to classify it, it's kind of. I would call it flat almost.
Yeah.
Like when I put it in my mouth. A very like. There's no like wash of flavor. It's more of just like. There's like.
It's so
some very simple single flat flavor.
Yeah.
I can't place it, but like,
yeah. So okay, that's that's a really astute. That's great. I know that one of the things that we've been working on is developing your palate. So recognizing that's excellent. Exactly correct too. When I taste this, the first thing that happens is I'm sort of surprised that I don't have anything happening. Like, it doesn't really taste like much. And then it sits for a second and you start getting that graham cracker at the back. You start getting that delightful brown sugar at the back. Mm-hmm. And it starts to kind of creep in on you. But I think the term flat I really like because it is. It's like a soda that doesn't have carbonation yet. You taste it, there's something there, but it doesn't make your mouth feel the way it should.
Yeah, there's like so many other things. Just this like... It's a very like sort of complex, like I don't know, like not orchestra, but this is complex, like complex spectrum of things going on, mm-hmm. and this is sort of like I'm bourbon.
Yeah,
like just that's it. Simple. I'm bourbon.
It is a bourbon, but it's a good bourbon. Like there's nothing wrong with it. Like you said, it doesn't burn that hard. This is an excellent bourbon for someone who's looking to mix a drink or just getting interested in like finding some of the finer tastes. Mm-hmm. You're right, 90% ABV, it doesn't burn all that much. Part of that is because of the 90%. Part of that is because it's probably very low in rye. Rye will add spiciness to a bourbon and give it a bit more heat and fire. Mm-hmm. So this is probably a low rye. It's got that lovely graham cracker taste that I got in the back of it. It's good.
Yeah. One of the things that sets it apart is being a good entry-level bourbon. Mm-hmm. Doesn't have any information at all about the mash bill. Mm-hmm. So, sorry.
It's true. No, when I was researching the bottle, I didn't find it either.
Yeah.
They may have it out there somewhere.
Yep.
But, yeah.
Going from what we've learned so far, I know it has at least 51% corn.
Yeah. You know what? Let's do that. We're going to do it. All right. What does it need to be bourbon? What's the thing? Give me a thing. What does it need to be bourbon? You did just say 51% corn. So
give me a second. I'm definitely not. I'm remembering. Give me a second.
You remember. I will wait patiently.
Okay. So to be bourbon,
astutely,
it has to be in a virgin charred oak barrel.
Handsomely.
It has to be 51% corn minimum.
That's true.
Generally, some other type of grains added. Common ones being wheat or rye or barley. I don't remember.
You can do barley for sure.
I suppose barley would be a weird one. I think that popped in my head because my wife used to be a big like beer person, but also like I think I saw somebody that had that and I went, "What?"
Yeah.
So
it's a thing. In fact, technically, any grain can become whiskey. That's all it needs to be whiskey is grain. Okay. There's a whole conversation happening in the whiskey world right now about rice whiskey. And there's people who they'll argue it's not real whiskey. There's people who are like, no, it's whiskey, it's grain. And then like there's even other things where that gets interesting because they're distilling it using fungus instead of instead of yeast and stuff. So there's definitely that whole track that you can go down if you want to nerd out about that.
Right. Okay.
100%.
So then the other stuff is there's an age requirement if it is a straight bourbon, or if it is a bottled and bond bourbon, or if it is some other things.
Yes.
Right. So it's 2 years minimum for straight bourbon.
Yeah, I find it best to think of it in a scale. So for regular bourbon, it just has to be aged in charred oak barrels, new charred oak barrels, which means they cut down the tree, they make the barrel, they char it, they age it. That's it.
There's never been any other
expression in there.
No other alcohol, but no other use, right? It has to, like by virgin, it literally means it has to be brand new.
Pretty much. I'm only 100% sure that it can't have aged alcohol before. I don't know if like they would have an issue if like the tree was used as a kayak and turned into a bourbon or something. But
okay, it'd be interesting to know though if it could have like if you could have stored something in it.
Yeah.
Like, could you have stored grains in it, or could you have stored liquids in it?
Like
right? So
put apples in a barrel and then
you-
use that barrel to age whiskey?
Yeah, it'd be interesting to like look into that to see how explicit the definition of virgin is. Because like
Homework, man.
yeah, perfect. Because like there was just the other day somebody surprised me with the like it has to be aged in an oak barrel.
Yeah.
But there's no age minimum unless it's at least a straight bourbon.
Correct.
Which is like, oh, well, that seems strange.
And when it hits 2 years in a virgin charred oak barrel, then you can call it straight bourbon.
Well, and then any other aging, right, is another weird thing where it's like if it's a 12-year, that means the minimum age is 12 years, but it could actually have other stuff in it, right?
Yeah. Oh, okay. So you're talking about like the age statement on the bottle.
Yeah.
So age statement is not the same thing as how long it was aged. I know it's very confusing. It's weird. So
I might have just opened a can of worms I'm not ready for yet.
That's all right.
I saw how excited you got. Clearly, this is going to be a long conversation.
No worries. So real quick, real brief, and we'll get into this in a later episode. Okay. Starts regular whiskey.
Yep.
Whiskey's whiskey. You ferment grain, you get whiskey.
Okay.
From there, if it's 51% corn and it meets some of these other requirements we're talking about, then it's considered bourbon. If it meets all those requirements and as part of it, you aged it for at least 2 years in a new charred oak barrel, which you have to age it some. So if you hit at least 2 years, then it's straight bourbon.
Okay.
And in fact, that's what you see a lot. Like you look at the bottle. In fact, is this Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey?
Yep. So it's at least 2 years.
Exactly. And so that's going to be the most common thing.
I missed that.
Yeah.
Oh, I totally missed it. I tried to go for all the legal terms. I apologize. I'll try harder.
It's like we were talking about. It's so easy to miss these things on these bottles, but they all mean something, right? Like there's the branding and marketing, like 1783. Okay, it's branding, it's marketing. But straight bourbon, straight means something.
Right.
Bourbon means something.
Right.
Bottled in bond means something.
Right.
And that's the next step. If it's aged for at least 4 years in a barrel, and that barrel is kept in a government authorized bonded warehouse, then that bottle of whiskey can be considered what's called bottled in bond.
Right, which is full circle.
Yep.
Because the name of the warehouse is KSP something.
Yes, it is. So you are absolutely right. We just went full circle, baby.
All right.
We started at Evan Williams and we landed at Evan Williams.
All right. So that's actually a good point, right? So he was also the first commercial distillery, right?
He was.
So now today, commercial distillery is kind of a much larger thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's something like, I looked at it the other day, there's something like 80 to 100 million barrels last year alone.
Oh, yeah.
I think it was just of bourbon. I don't remember if it was of all whiskey or if it was just bourbon. It's like some absurd amount, right?
Oh, yeah. There are more barrels of Jameson in Ireland than there are people.
Okay. All right.
Like whiskey is like it's a thing.
Right.
Okay, so let's talk about that, right? Like we were talking about the commercial landscape and we talked about the 3-tier system. And let's talk about who owns whiskey.
Right.
So whiskey is broken down into a couple. Let me rephrase that. The majority of whiskey is owned by 2 companies. And that's it. I know it sounds crazy, right? Like all these brands, all the stuff at the liquor store, tequila and whiskey and vodka and all the things. Most whiskeys are owned by 2 companies.
Well, so, and to clarify, to totally split hairs, which is great for both of us, is what you mean is the vast majority of the large volume of sales is performed by 2 companies, right? Because like there's thousands of labels.
Yes.
But a lot of those labels have like tens of barrels.
Yes.
Right. And so when you say like most whiskey, you don't mean that they own
the most
thousands
labels.
of labels. They don't own thousands of labels usually. No. So it's not that they have like some horrifically large market share of the labels. They just have some massive market share of all of those relationships we talked about with the distributors and the producers and the retailers and all that stuff. Right?
Yes, combined with the labels that they do own,
Right.
being the ones you know.
Right.
So, for instance, one of the biggest players in this game is MGP.
Right.
MGP is so much bourbon on the shelf.
Right.
Like, and not just bourbon, like so much alcohol on the shelf is MGP.
Right.
And MGP makes whiskey in mass. That's what they do. They
people refer to it as MGP juice or whatever, right? Yeah.
Yes, very much so. Like it is the epitome of the industrialized creation of whiskey.
Right.
And then you also have Diageo.
Right.
Diageo is another global, massive brand. They own huge, global company owns huge brands.
Yep.
And like for instance, Diageo owns Lagavulin, which is their marketing for it was the Prince of Whiskies. It's a Scotch. When you talk about Whistle Pig in America, the bourbon Whistle Pig, that's MGP.
Yeah. But so there's a fine line, right? So Diageo is a holding company, basically. They buy liquors and spirits.
Yes.
Not strictly whiskey, right? Don't they have a bunch of other stuff?
Yeah, I think they do. I think they got like ports and sherries and like tequilas and stuff.
And so like their thing is they buy the brands and they kind of homogenize them a little bit.
Yeah.
But MGP does both, right?
Yes.
They are both a base materials supplier.
Yep.
But then they're also like a massive like holding company and partner, right?
Exactly.
And the reason I know this actually,
yeah.
and we can kind of tie all this back to other massive market things. So the reason I know this is we finally did the Bourbon Trail for like a very quick speed run for my birthday this year. And one of the places we went was Lux Row because they do a couple things I love. One was our old house bourbon, which was Rebel, which is super simple.
Yeah.
I'm destroyed that they got rid of the Rebel 80, which is like a weeded bourbon because it was super duper easy, simple like bourbon to have.
Such a good drop.
For a total steal.
Yeah.
And they got rid of the 80 and now you can only find the 100 and even that's a little hard to find.
Sure.
Because I think they're trying to up level their base a little bit.
Yeah.
But then they also have like Blood Oaths and some other cool stuff, right? Which is something I'm very excited to share at some point.
Oh yeah.
But not today. Not that much today.
Not today.
But so so that was one of the places we went to was Lux Row, and they are partnered with MGP, and I think there's some sort of arrangement there. But as far as I can tell, they're still producing their own everything. And they're still doing everything they've always done, but so that's sort of the Diageo type relationship or partnership.
Exactly.
They haven't been forced to like change their juice or anything else.
And that's a huge difference between Diageo and MGP.
Right.
And this isn't hard and fast. Like this is there's a lot of nuance here with each of these brands. But Diageo, like you were saying, generally will acquire the labels and then let them continue doing their thing and add them to their portfolio.
Right.
Whereas MGP will acquire labels and also just makes its own juice and then puts it into places and sells it as whatever it is.
Right.
And because you'll find bourbon connoisseurs get like kind of frustrated about MGP stuff because the only difference is where they put it. Like Whistle Pig will be a $90 bottle, and this other one will be a $32 bottle. And it's they're like, there's literally very little difference between these juices. It's the same manufacturer, the same plant.
Right.
The only difference is what bottle they put it in.
Right. Well, and like we can get into the chemistry later, but at some point, there's something to be said though about the fact that like the juice, the primary parts of the juice, do come down to the grains you use and stuff. But like at the end of the day, like once it gets pure enough and it becomes the high end, the super high proof stuff that you start with.
Yeah.
Like at that point, there's almost nothing in it except actual alcohol chemicals. So like the idea that you can tell the difference, I'm a little suspicious about, like just because the work goes into the rest of it. It's the barrels and it's the aging and it's the finishing and it's all the other bits that go into it.
Oh man.
And I do, don't get me wrong, right? Like I don't know enough about this. I'm the noob, but like being on the chemistry side of things, like it does seem to me a little odd that people are like so blown out that, it's not this or that. And it like, there's very few places I've seen that pick the specific sub harvest of the type of corn for the like subspecies, yada yada, right? So like
that is 100% accurate.
Right, and so like if other people aren't putting in the effort anyway, it's just the same anyway.
It's just the same for those who aren't putting in the effort.
Right.
And this is the thing that we'll talk about a little bit on another episode.
I think we're going to talk about it a lot.
Yeah.
Because that's the stuff that I'm really jazzed about, right?
Oh, yeah.
I've got a whole story about red corn with Still Austin,
Yo.
and blue corn, and all those things. I've got all kinds of like...
Oh.
all that stuff is what gets me spun up is the idea of the people... When people really do put in the effort.
Yeah. Oh, we haven't even gotten into Later and like Bruichladdich and the way that they have so Bruichladdich, a Scottish distillery, a very good Scottish distillery. They have books of every farmer of barley on the island of Islay, and every acre of barley that's being grown, and the elements of the soil, and the things that are, and we're talking about pre-chemistry part of it here, like the grain that's going to eventually malt, that's going to eventually decay, that's going to eventually be eaten by yeast.
Right.
Like what soil is it grown in?
Yeah.
Comes into the level of that they are getting into when they're distilling their bottles. And that's like, man, I gotta tell you, when we get into that kind of stuff, my nerd just goes nuts.
Well, that's the stuff I'm really excited about, really understanding and appreciating, right? Like,
yeah.
I need to build this base understanding, but at the end of the day, I do want to really get into the deep details of.
Let me give you something for your science brain to at least be able to understand why, even with chemistry, there can be a difference between what we make. We're going to start with Scotch because there's a little bit more stringentness with Scotch. For Scotch, if a bottle says that it is a malt, a single malt, or a blended malt, then it is 100% barley.
Okay.
100%. There is nothing else allowed in there. That's why we're going to start there, because bourbon's the mash bill, and it's got all this stuff.
Okay.
Right? What was I just talking about before that?
Chemistry and mash bill, and why there is a difference.
Yes. So all Scotches that are a single malt, they are 100% barley grain, no other grains. Scotch and the Scottish Whiskey Association, I'm going to say. I think it's either Council, Board, or Association. But so the Scottish, the people who are in charge of Scottish whiskey, they only allow 3 things to be put in if you're making Scotch. You can only put in the barley, the water, and a little bit of caramel coloring. That's right. I hate to break everybody's thing, but there's caramel coloring in most whiskey. It's a thing. We'll talk about it on another episode. So those are the only 3 things. But you get such a crazy difference in taste, and that is from the process of making it. One part of that, and the point that I wanted to make with the science, is there are 2 distilleries in the entirety of Scotland that have one specific thing that makes them different from every other distillery in Scotland, and that's that they use hard water.
Okay.
And that's the only difference.
Well, yeah.
But when I taste Glenmorangie, and when I taste Highland Park, there's something there. Now, maybe I'm just imagining it, but that difference applies. And in fact, like where they got their water from was a huge deal for early distillers as well.
Well, for me, that makes sense because the water comes into it after it's like ferociously strong straight alcohol. That's what I mean is like within bourbon and stuff, right? Like there's this process where you like hyper distill it to sometimes up to like crazy high proofs, right?
Sure.
Before.
Well, but there's water in the mash too.
Yeah. But what I mean is like this: the mash is made and then it's distilled, and when it comes out of the still,
then it's going to be 100%.
It's that white dog stuff, and it's like 90% or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So there's the 180 proof or more, or whatever, some amount in there, and that has literally 90% alcohol means it's 90% of one molecule. So it's like it's or one whatever, like it's 90% of one compound. Yeah. That's like that's it, right? And so like
100% means it would be pure 100% alcohol.
Right.
Even Everclear is not 100% alcohol.
No, exactly. And so like, but at that point, there's like so little left of the original character, and that's what I mean. Is I could see like when you add the water to dilute it for part of the barreling and aging and all that stuff. That totally makes sense. That like you're adding things back in to change it for sure. What I'm getting at is like the part people get like irritated about is the MGP is that the White Dog part, right? It's the super duper mash, like crazy, like it's the super duper pure stuff, which is like there's so little characteristic left there if you hadn't already started with some highly unique compound. So if it's already one of the massive other brands that's not saying like, you know, they know exactly which farm it's from and all that stuff, right?
Sure.
Like at that point, it's like, well, why does it matter?
So that's a valid question.
Right.
And I think I'm going to spend the entirety of this show showing you why.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. And I mean, I'm going to continue to grow and appreciate it, right? So
yeah, it's honestly, man, like there is, like, I'm really excited that you're asking questions like this because there are things coming when it comes to the distilling process. Like I look forward to the first time I take you to the distillery and they let you taste the juice as it's coming out of the still. Not the heads or tails, but the middle bit where they're going to bottle it, they're going to turn it into a thing, and they'll let you put your finger through the thing and taste it.
And heads and tails means something, right?
Heads and tails means a thing in distilling. When you distill whiskey, the first stuff that evaporates when you're boiling it through the still is called the heads, and it's toxic. And then the last stuff that comes out, or is left, is called the tails, and it's crap. And so a distiller, one of the tasks of the distiller is finding the heart. And the heart is the part between the head and the tail. And so they literally, like, let's say that there's a hose coming here, and this is the trash. When they start distilling, the hose is pointed into the trash, just down the drain. And at some point, the distiller just goes over and moves it into a barrel. And then later on, they come back and they move it out of the barrel, and it goes back into the trash. And that is often how they cut the heart from their whiskey. Right. It may not be a hose in a barrel, but it's literally that simple. They just decide, all right, flip the switch. It's now going into barrels instead of the trash.
Jeez.
It's some of that skill we were talking about. It's incredible. So even if you just looked at like 30 more seconds ahead versus 30 more seconds of heart in your barrel, you're going to end up with differences at MGP from a craft distiller.
Yeah, lower profits or bigger garbage. So.
Yeah.
All right. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well.
Anyway.
To you, sir.
To you. To the bond, buddies.
To the bond.